Hello, Dimitri, could you just confirm that we're actually live and that everybody can hear me and see me, please? Wonderful. Okay. So for those of you who are just tuning in now, you've tuned into the Growth Mindset in Mathematics webinar. And my name is Melissa Georgiou, and I'd like to welcome you today to this webinar and say a warm hello from Finland. I'm coming to you live from Finland, and we're experiencing this lovely autumnal weather. So there's lots of colour on the horizon, but lots of damp in our bones and in the trees around us. So it's a lovely time. So wherever you are in the world, just settle in for the next 45 minutes to an hour, and I'm going to take you through some growth mindset fundamentals, and hopefully you'll learn something new. Well, let's just set that intention now that we're all going to learn something new. So wherever you are, just relax. Enjoy what you're about to see, but also keep in mind that the takeaways that you'd like to take from this webinar. I'm really happy that you're here. I know already that we have people tuning in from different parts of the world, and that's really exciting. It's really nice to be able to do this online at different locations all at once and just all be here together. So I'd really like to honour the fact that you've turned up today to learn a little bit more about growth mindset. We're going to start in just a minute. So 30 more seconds till we get started, and until then, just take a nice deep breath, and I'll take a sip of water. And what we're going to do today is talk about not only growth mindset, but how you can make your classroom or your school a growth mindset classroom or school in a few easy steps. Now, obviously, you're not going to walk away and become a growth mindset guru, but be prepared to find something that you can use in practical terms as soon as you leave this webinar. So I think we'll just get started. Welcome again. Take this minute to close the door, turn off your phone, and set yourself an intention. Why are you here today? Let's look for at least one takeaway through this whole webinar, and maybe two. Maybe you'll find two new things that you can learn or implement after watching this webinar, all about growth mindset and how to share it in your teaching or leadership practice. I'll just introduce myself yet again. You can probably see me in the bottom of the screen, but there I am again, a photo that was taken 5 years ago, and I love to use it because things change, but my image of myself doesn't. My name is Melissa. I have 15 years of classroom experience, so I have been face-to-face with children at the coalface and teaching growth mindset strategies to them. As I said, I'm coming to you from Finland, so I have a Finnish and Australian teaching qualification, and I have taught here as well. I'm also a writer, and I'm a growth mindset enthusiast. So that includes these two books, or this one book that I've written actually about growth mindset for kids. And I'm proud to say that it is being used and recommended by the University of Helsinki in their teacher training program. So that's a book for students about this cute little mosquito, Mimi, who learns from her mistakes in an interesting way. And it's just a nice way for both teachers, parents, and students to relate to growth mindset. So that's me and my growth mindset background. In today's webinar, we're going to learn about growth mindset and find out how teaching growth mindset leads to better grades. So we can't ask for more than that. We're also going to touch on growth mindset and the brain. And finally, we'll end the webinar with 5 tips for building growth mindset in your school and in your classroom. So that's the meat of it. But before we get there, we do have to start with some foundational parts of growth mindset. Before we also launch into what growth mindset is and the foundation of my growth mindset, I just want to draw your attention to the sponsor of this webinar, and that is Eduten. It is a learning platform. It's Finland's #1 learning platform, and one of their key products is Finland Math. And in Finland Math is growth mindset. It's kind of integrated into Finland Math, and students, when they use Eduten, actually have exposure to growth mindset strategies because of the tool itself. So naturally, students are able to access growth mindset strategies when they use this wonderful platform that is also around the world. And at the end of this webinar, I'll give you more details about how to sign up and get Eduten platform and Finland Math right into your classroom at the touch of a button. So that's exciting, and it brings me a lot of pleasure to be able to promote Eduten and Finland Math. But before we get started, let's connect. As I said at the beginning of this webinar when people were trickling in, that we are here from different parts of the world. So let's just take a moment to connect with each other, and we'll do that by taking a nice deep breath all at once. So I invite you to take a nice deep breath in through your nose and just release it. And just feel how it feels to be you in this moment. You've taken this hour to get to know growth mindset a little bit better. So what better way to start it with a nice deep breath and to just come home in this moment. So let's get started, and that is with the origins of growth mindset. So over 30 years ago, the grandmother of growth mindset, Carol Dweck, and her colleagues started researching student attitudes about failure. So what happened was some students bounced back and others didn't. And what they found when they were doing this study was that the students who bounced back had a view that they could learn from their mistakes and try again. And so she called it growth mindset. And that's what we're here all about. So after this theory was born. And what she did was she organised, along with her colleagues, a growth mindset intervention. In fact, they did this research with a math class, and that's why it's really pertinent to Eduten and maths in general, because the origins of growth mindset was the studies and the research was done around mathematics. So I want to tell you a little bit about that. But basically, what came out of the study was that growth mindset could be taught. And that's the fantastic thing that I'm going to share with you today. But let me tell you a little bit about the study first, for those of you who love the science and the background. So they studied 7th graders at an inner city New York school, I think it was. They divided students into 2 groups. So the control group was taught about study skills, memory, and basically how memory works and how to study well. And then the rest of the group was taught about growth mindset, which included some study skill stuff, but basically how the brain works and how it grows with learning to make you smarter, and how to apply this idea to their schoolwork. So they were the 2 groups. And by the way, of course, in the end, they also taught the growth mindset to the other group. And this was the impact. 3 times as many students in the growth mindset group showed an increase in effort and motivation compared with the control group. So that's the amazing outcome of this research. And this was, like I said, 30 years ago, and they're constantly researching it and upgrading parts of the theory. But in essence, if children and students learn growth mindset, they can rebound back from failure and improve their grades. And incidentally, the control group actually not only did they decline, but they continued to decline. So it was lucky that they taught the other group growth mindset in the end to even the keel. So basically, the outcome of the study is that students can influence their own learning. Learning about growth mindset allows students to become captains of their own ship. And as teachers and educators and leaders, that's all we can ever hope for with our students, that they influence their own learning so they don't have to participate in this very outdated model of top-down learning. So this is the beauty of growth mindset. But in a nutshell, the working definition of growth mindset is this: the understanding that abilities and intelligence can be improved. Now, think about that for a second in your own life. Think about your own mindset and about your ideas about learning and intelligence. Think about perhaps what you were taught as a younger person, and think about the impact that just this small phrase, this simple phrase, could have had on your future learning. If you knew at a young age that your abilities and intelligence can be improved even further, if you were explicitly taught that, what difference would it have made in your life? So basically, it's not just about the gifts that you're born with. Of course, people have natural ability in some areas, and growth mindset doesn't deny that at all. But what growth mindset is pointing out is that it's not just about those gifts. It's about what you do with those gifts and how far you want to take them. Now, I tell this story a lot, but I'll say it again here because I think it's worth mentioning. I remember when I was a high school maths student actually, and I wasn't doing so great. And my teacher told me, listen, don't strive too hard. You'll probably never be good at it. And he basically told me that I should go off and become a hairdresser instead because he didn't think that I was good enough to be a part of his class. But after he told me that, I have to say that I took it as gospel that I'd never improve, and two, that I'm not so good at maths. And now, even though these days I don't imagine that anybody watching this webinar would say such a thing to your students, the reason I'm telling you that story is we do give our students subtle messages about whether they're intelligent or not, or whether they can improve further or not, or of our expectations of them. So as a teacher, I just want to reiterate that students go where you set the expectation. And that's the main thing here, that if we give our students certain messages, they are listening and they will follow them. So I'll talk more about that later in the top tip section. But basically, in a growth mindset, people believe that their basic abilities can be developed through hard work, and brains and talent are just the starting point. So this view creates a love of learning and a resilience that is essential for greater accomplishment. Also, growth mindset encourages 21st century thinking and future skills. And as I said before, Eduten is a great example of a growth mindset tool that helps children with their 21st century and future skills. Shameless plug there, but it's a great thing there. So let's have a look at the two different types of mindsets. And I just want to say now that it's not about one mindset or another. It's about both mindsets, because with growth mindset, we're not aiming or wanting to be growth mindset gurus all the time and just march through life knowing I've got a growth mindset and this is how I'll tackle everything, because naturally we do have a fixed mindset in some areas, and then naturally we do tend towards a growth mindset in others. So what this is about, though, is understanding when fixed mindset thinking comes up, and then when growth mindset thinking comes up, and trying to sway the spectrum over to the growth mindset side. So a fixed mindset person might say this phrase, I'm not good at this, I give up. I have a son here at home who I hear saying that about certain things, and usually it's just a confidence issue, but that's a true example of fixed mindset. So the fixed mindset person wants to look smart and they fear looking stupid. They don't want to learn. They're not as curious as a growth mindset person. The fixed mindset person, as I mentioned before, believes that talent and intelligence are kind of preset. You're born with it or you're not, and that's that. And then the fixed mindset person will avoid challenges, questions, or failures. So the fixed mindset person won't push themselves that little bit harder to try something new. They sort of don't go out of their comfort zone. And some of the key elements of a fixed mindset person. And then over to growth mindset, the elements there are they embrace challenges, they welcome feedback, they see mistakes as growth opportunities, they see other people succeeding and think, yes, I want to know how to do that too. And they just keep trying and they don't give up and they focus on improvement. So one of the key growth mindset, probably the famous phrase that you've heard about, is that I'm not good at this yet. So yet is the key word here, and that is growth mindset in a nutshell. So these are the two mindsets. And as I said, we're not talking about whether you are one or the other, whether you're fixed or growth mindset, because what often happens is that we have a mixed mindset, and that's okay. But when we learn growth mindset, we can, like I said, move the bar a little bit more over to the growth mindset side and hopefully crowd out fixed mindset thinking. But back to children, when I talk about my son here at home and the typical fixed mindset thinking that he'll come up with. And I made this little infographic to tell you. So that's him there. Mistakes suck. He tries to cover them up. I love doing things that I already know how to do. So trying new things might be tricky or embarrassing. And basically that feeling of that I'm super smart in that area and I don't really need to try so hard. That's a real pothole that fixed mindset thinkers might fall into. The growth mindset thinking or thinker would say things like, oh, it's okay to make mistakes, and asking questions helps me learn, and practice helps me improve, and they love tricky challenges. And when they finish something, they don't rush through it and get to the end. They might look at it again to see if there's anywhere that they can improve it. So these are all the hallmarks of fixed mindset and growth mindset thinking. I'm going to just surge on ahead and talk now about growth mindset and the brain, because we can't talk about growth mindset without having a little look at the brain and how it works. And this is all a part of growth mindset teaching and learning that we need to pass on to our students. This is part of the whole growth mindset subject. So get ready for it. Here's the big word. Big word, simple meaning. Neuroplasticity. That's at the heart of growth mindset. So neuroplasticity basically means that our brains are plastic. And when we say our brains are plastic, we don't mean that we can get in there and bend them, but somehow metaphorically we can, because we are able to grow our brains through effort and practice, and we need to exercise our brains to stay in shape. And actually, more than metaphorically, our brains do grow in certain areas. So you've probably heard of this wonderful quote by Donald Hebb, I think it is, and that is neurons that fire together wire together, which basically means when you're practicing something over and over and over again, the neurons in that area of your brain fire together, and then they get all entangled and that part of your brain grows. So they did some study with some taxi drivers in London and found that when they did an MRI of their brains, the part of their brain that were able to access maps and cognitive function such as that was more enlarged than your regular non-taxi driver and things like that. So they've studied a lot of brains and found that when you practice certain things, that part of your brain grows, and when something becomes strong, of course, good things follow. So with practice, new neural pathways grow. And this is a great thing to share with our students, because that gives them autonomy over their own learning, and that, the brain needs mistakes to grow. And every time that we find something difficult when we're learning something new, it doesn't mean that we're not good at it. It just means our brain is growing. So you can let your children know, or your teachers, if you're a school leader, pass this tidbit of information. If there's a takeaway that you might take away from this webinar, is that when something's hard, or when our brain hurts because it's just too much to take in, it just means that our brain is growing. So actually, it's good news. It's good news. So when things feel hard, just imagine this little guy at the gym with the dumbbells or the barbells going up and down above his head. So some really lovely things that you can share with your children. When something is hard, it just means your brain is growing. So basically, growth mindset students and teachers focus on improvement, and they see effort as a way to build their abilities. So growth mindset people see failure as a natural part of the learning process. And that's a really important part of any type of learning that we do, embracing failure And the good thing about Eduten Playground, for instance, which if you don't know, it's a math platform with lots of, just think a textbook via the computer. Every time children fail or have a misconception when they're using Eduten Playground, they have the ability to bounce back really easily without fear of getting yelled at and without shame of making mistakes. The program immediately allows them to keep on going with it. And that's what we're trying to do with our students in real life as well. So now this section, I'm going to talk about the top tips, and I guess that's what we're all here for. So I've already given you a top tip about letting your students know that when they're struggling with a concept or anything in general, it just means that their brain is growing, and you can remind them of times in their life that they overcame things that they probably never thought they would, such as riding a bike. Nobody gets on a bike first go and just pedals beautifully around the field. They have to try and try and try again, and then it becomes second nature because you've grown and solidified the parts of your brain that allow you to ride the bike and pedal around and all of that sort of stuff. Another tip that I wanted to let you know is that, to remember that I haven't put in these 5 tips, is that as a teacher or a school leader, it's really important to check your own growth mindset. Do you have a growth mindset, or do you naturally err towards a fixed mindset? And how is it that can you change that with the people that you work with? Is it possible for you to change that? Is there anything that you could do? But let's get on to the first tip. After examining your own mindset, here are some tips that you can use and pass on to your students or your people in your school. So number 1 is this. We need to come at growth mindset with a sense of curiosity. We need to explicitly talk about it and let our students in on this big secret. You need to share information with them about how the brain grows, just like I showed you just now, that how it grows with repetition and practice. Don't be afraid to teach them about those cool parts of the brain. You don't need to be a neuroscientist to pass on those facts that have come out of research that's constantly going on at the moment. If you believe your brain can grow, you behave differently. It's as simple as that. And that is really the essence of growth mindset. If you believe that your brain can grow, you behave differently. Wow, it's like this light bulb going off in the minds of young people that, oh, our brains grow. Okay, that means I can learn this. That means I wasn't born dumb at maths and I don't need to go off and become a hairdresser. I'm going to ignore what that teacher says because I know that my brain can grow. So then I'm going to work really hard to fill in the gaps that there might be. It's really that simple. It's so simple, it's kind of painful, but it's also good to be reminded of it. Okay, this is the big one here, and this was a problem with growth mindset when it first came out, and I'm going to talk about that in a moment. But basically, what you want to do as a growth mindset teacher, after you've shared all the growth mindset stuff with your kids or with your staff, you need to focus on praising effort. So we're not praising the person themselves. We want to praise the effort that they put in, okay? That means we need to focus on the process rather than the end result. So think of a child who might bring home a maths test or say a spelling test. You don't go straight to the mark and say, 16 out of 20 and judge it as good or bad, whatever, is in your mind. What you do is you could say to your child or your student, what happened here? What do you think you could improve next time? Do you feel like you did your best effort? So those sorts of questions, but I'm going to give you some explicit explanation of this in just a second. First, I want to tell you a little bit more about the difference between person praise and process praise. So person praise is these sorts of lines. Now, I know that as parents, if any of you are parents, we've all used these types of lines with our kids because of the way we are. We can't contain our excitement, of course, and you're very proud of your children. And even as a teacher, you're very proud of your children for whatever they've come forth with. But these are all examples of person praise. Like, you're such a genius. Oh, you're so smart. You're so good at art. And those things, while it's not the worst thing to say those types of things to your children, but basically you could probably replace those words with things like, instead of "this is so good," things like "what's happening here." So take the emphasis off the "you" in that. So all of these have the word "you" in them because you're praising the actual person. So if your praise includes the word "you," it probably is person praise. Okay? And then there's process praise. And it sounds like this. So we're focusing on what led to that final thing that usually we praise. So I can see you worked really hard on that and didn't give up. And then you didn't get the result you wanted. What do you think you can do better this time or next time? So those types of things about the process of what they did or what they're sharing or what they're trying to create, if you can focus more on that process, that is a really important growth mindset strategy. And then I've pulled together a few of these quotes and what you could say instead. So instead of "you are so smart," which of course we want to say that to our kids, you could say, "I can see you worked so hard on this." And instead of, and I have heard this, and this is why I've written it down, "That's not right. Are you paying attention? It seems like you're not even trying." Okay, that's like a triple loaded comment. But instead of that, you could say, "That's not right. Be honest. We're not sugarcoating things here." But then you could say, "You don't understand this yet." And then what strategies could you try to understand it better? So that's the difference between the two types of praises. And as I said at the beginning of this section of number 2, the using praise in the right way, unfortunately, when growth mindset first came out into the mainstream, people would just say, "Oh, you don't get this yet. Oh, just try and try again." And that's not what growth mindset is about. It's not banging your head against a wall trying to do something that isn't working. What growth mindset is about is keeping feedback strategic. So how can we make this happen? Not just keep doing the same thing, keep trying. And so this is the really important thing that we need to remember, because when growth mindset first came out, there was this thing called false growth mindset. So, a lot of people were going, "Okay, yeah, I know all about growth mindset. I'm just going to say, oh, well, you tried really hard, better luck next time." So we really need to think about our own mindset here, because they also did a study with some educators some 10 years ago and basically found that teachers who had a fixed mindset about math ability, for instance, were more likely to judge students as having low potential. So if we look at our own growth mindset, then we kind of pass that on even more naturally to the people around us. So fixed mindset people generally use comfort-oriented feedback. So they would say, "Well, my maths teacher wasn't comforting me with my poor mathematical skills. He was banishing me from the group." But if he was a comfort-based fixed mindset guy, he would have been comforting me and saying, "Look, it's okay, you're just not good at math." Well, he kind of did that basically. But he attempted basically to lower my expectations because his expectations of me were low. So, yeah, and I definitely had comfort-oriented feedback about my own maths skills. So I wonder, in your life, have you ever encountered somebody giving you comfort-oriented feedback rather than strategic feedback, and how it has helped or hindered you in the past? Just something to think about. But basically, here are the results for those of you who love graphs, and at Eduten, the Edutenians just love graphs. So here are the results of a different study that investigated the impact of effort praise versus intelligence praise after a failure. So basically, when children or students were praised about their effort, the number of problems solved increased, and also their marks increased. And that's basically how Eduten Playground works. It just gives the results straight away and really focuses on effort rather than intelligence, and children are naturally inclined to keep on keeping on. So that's the wonderful thing there. Now, tip number 3, quality over quantity. Deep understanding is more valuable than speed. So you need to try to remember to give your students the opportunity to discover new paths to problem solving. So if we talk about maths again, after all, we are a maths company. So I just wonder, in your own teaching, when you're teaching maths, is there room for them to teach a friend? Is that possible for your students to do? Teach kids strategies they use, as well as how they talk about big mathematical ideas, and realizing that those big mathematical ideas themselves are more important than the final answer. So you could let them know that the world's leading mathematicians often spend years focusing on one problem or one proof or one idea. So in practical terms, if you're a teacher, a maths teacher, you could assign fewer problems. So the research has also shown that when kids see a worksheet or an assignment with 20 or 30 problems, they may be more inclined to find a way to get through it quickly. I know, speaking from experience, my own son is like that. He wants to race through things because he wants to finish. But if you assign fewer problems and just make sure that they justify their answers or look for multiple solutions, that's a hot tip about bringing quality over quantity into your classroom. They're more likely to slow down and think about the process rather than just mechanically do something. So you could also replace your practice with some really lovely reflective questions. Maths is often right or wrong. Yes, that's true. But within maths, could you ask questions like, what was the big idea that we learned about today? What did you struggle with? And then this is not related necessarily to maths, but what mistakes did you make today and what did you learn from them? This is the thing about failure, and just as a fun aside, tomorrow is National Failure Day in Finland. So it's a national day of celebrating failure. So it's a time that we can ask ourselves, what big mistakes have we made and what do we learn from them? Because it's okay to make mistakes, there's no problem. It's all about how we repair the mistakes or what we learn from the mistakes. So that's just a cool thing to keep in mind. We've got 2 more tips before we get to the end of this, and that is number 4, let your kids have brain breaks. Now, I talked earlier about the brain and how it grows with practice over and over again. That's fine, but it's really, really important to let your kids rest as a teacher. And as a school leader, it's really important to factor break time into the school day, no matter how old you are. So you may or may not know that the Finnish system have breaks every 45 minutes. So the timetable is arranged around 45-minute cycles, and every 45 minutes, children are expected to get out of their seats and go outside. So that's a really good example of having a brain break, which is really important. And the science now tells us, actually, even though the Finnish system has been giving children brain breaks for many years now, the science has caught up to that and has actually, it's solidified and supports that having breaks helps you learn faster and smarter. It's no good trying to sit down for 3 hours. It's better to sit 45 minutes at a time. It's actually 40 minutes, the science now tells us, and then have a 15-minute break afterwards. But I also need to impress upon you, and I'm not sure how much of this, of course, you can influence as a school teacher or a leader, but just reminding your students that sleeping is a form of brain break as well. That's when the brain repairs and has rest. So it's a really important thing to mention. tip number 5, and we're coming right to the end of this now, and that is to embrace mistakes. So how is it in your classroom that you can embrace mistakes with your students? How can you make mistakes your friend? How is it that you do that in your classroom? Are you doing it? I know for myself, coming from a fixed mindset background who was always avoiding mistakes, I try really hard with my own child at home that when he does something practical like drops a glass or breaks something, not to get upset with him and just to go, it's okay, that's life. Now let's clean it up or let's fix it up. So you need to embrace mistakes in the classroom and make your classroom a zone where children are free to make mistakes without shame and without fear. So however you do that is up to you. So you could explicitly talk about that, but of course, a great thing to do is show your children how you've made mistakes in the past, or when you make a mistake, on the board, when you're writing something, point it out. Show them that you're human, and a part of being human is making mistakes. It's a really important thing to do. So when students and your own children see you making mistakes and bouncing back from them, they feel that they've got the breadth to make mistakes themselves. In a recent session at the Virtual Math Summit about building math minds, Pamela Cedar offered this list for embracing mistakes in the maths classroom, and I thought it was really great. So if we keep this in mind, that mistakes are expected, and then we respect them, and then we inspect them, we have a look and see exactly what happened, and then finally we correct them. So that's a really great step-by-step sequence of events to follow when you make a mistake or your students make a mistake. This would make a great poster to put into your classroom. So you could screenshot this now in case you want to remember it for later. So my question here for reflection now is that how can you better embrace mistakes as a teacher or as a regular human? Is there something that you can do? Feel free to write the answer to that in the chat box if you're watching this live. But just reflect about how you have embraced mistakes or how you would like to embrace mistakes as a teacher, parent, or school leader. Something to get you thinking. I'm just getting some comments in from the chat already. David Simons, thank you very much. You've written, glad to be here. Every point you've made so far is relevant to good learning, great webinar content. Thank you very much, David, and it's really nice to have you here too. And I'm glad that you're with us and feeling okay. So I'm going to wrap up the webinar here. It was a quick one, 40 minutes. Okay, that's good enough. But I just wanted to remind you that fixed and growth mindsets, they're not rigid things. You can move from one to the other depending on the context. The main thing that I want you to take away here is that the awareness of the brain's capacity to learn and grow is a very real thing. So if we pass that on to our students and our staff, we can help them to become growth mindset gurus, okay? So now's the time that you can reflect again about your 2 top takeaways or 1 top takeaway, because don't make this 40 minutes a waste of time, and it isn't. And I really want to thank you and honour you again for being here. But what can you take straight into your classroom or home life after participating in this webinar? What do you think you can commit to? Will it be passing on some of the information about the brain to your students? Will it be a different attitude towards making mistakes? Or can you discuss this with your colleague and take it a little bit further? Create a growth mindset group amongst your staff. Or will you do something really simple like allow your kids to have a brain break? So choose something in order to make this time well spent, please. Now, I want to finish up also with reminding you that Eduten platform is a great way to bring a growth mindset tool straight into your classroom. I know that we've already got some wonderful Eduten users watching this webinar today, so feel free to sing Eduten's praises in the chat box as well. But if you go to this link, www.eduten.com/get started, you can sign up for a 4-week trial of Eduten. And if you sign up now, I will contact you personally via WhatsApp or Messenger to arrange an Eduten demonstration. Basically, you can have a live demonstration of the product. Think maths textbook on a computer. Everybody can use it at once. You see everybody's results straight away. No more marking pages and pages of work because the artificial intelligence does it all for you. It's really the whole package when it comes to mathematics. So if you sign up straight away at the form that you will get after this webinar in the email, or there's probably a link below this webinar as well on the live YouTube. So sign up and I'll contact you both on WhatsApp or Messenger and via email to arrange a demonstration of this great product. I'd like to thank you very much for being here today because it's you that makes a difference, and I really appreciate that you're here trying to make a difference in your students or your schools' lives. So thank you very much for being here. My name is Melissa Georgiou and I work at Eduten, and would be really happy to show you a demonstration of this wonderful learning tool. I'm going to hang around for the next 10 minutes or so. If you've got any pointed questions about growth mindset, go ahead and type them in the chat, and my wonderful magician in the background is going to send me any messages that you might have. And if there aren't any, we'll just sign out as promised at the end of this hour. Yes, David, you've written that you want to experience failure yourself, or that's the best part of growth mindset, I get. Tess has written she's reading The Art of Possibility, and the author encourages students to say how fascinating when they make a mistake. I love that, Tess. That's so cool. I'm going to start doing that. How fascinating. That's really, really cool. Another thing that's a little bit related to that I have a friend who says they have this interesting idea when something hasn't gone their way or something that's sort of negative and blocking them. Instead of saying it's negative, they've said it's an interesting idea, but I love this. How fascinating, because then that just conjures up this feeling of curiosity and keeps you going. And David wrote, the times when I fail are the times when I really learn something. Yes, hallelujah, David, for sure. Even though failure hurts and it's one of the hardest things that we have to go through, the stuff that comes to us on the other side is fantastic. Blanca from Uruguay wrote, congratulations, Melissa. Thank you very much. And Tess, thank you for a great webinar. Thank you, Tess, and thank you, Blanca, for being here live. It's so nice to have you. So I think that if we don't have any other questions about this webinar, just go ahead. I urge you to sign up right now at the link that will be sent to you if you want to experience Eduten in your classroom. And like we've said, Eduten is a growth mindset tool, and it's here to help you implement growth mindset in your own classroom and in your school. So don't be afraid to sign up and keep in touch with us. Okay, Dimitri, I take it there's no more comments, so I think we'll let that go. Thank you so much for being here, and I'll keep in touch in future